So as you can see, it's not really flying weather today. Clouds are low and it's snowing, but that's okay because I grounded my plane until I fixed a nose wheel shimmy. So today's episode is all about nose wheel shimmy, what a common cause is, what the repair is, as well as a flight test afterwards whenever the weather breaks. Plus, I'm hoping to impart some wisdom that you can take home to your significant other on when it's the best time to beg for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. So follow along. Now in this video, when you see me working on the plane, I'm actually working on the plane. I don't have some production crew sitting up in the rafters that do all the work, and then I float in like a big talking head and pretend like I did everything while trying to push vitamin supplements on you. That stuff will not happen with the channel. Now let's get cracking. Now the first thing I need to do with this Piper Tomahawk is remove the top part of the cowl. I'll clear off some space here. Now I'll bring in engine hoist that I have, and I will lift the front of the aircraft up, and then I'll show you what's up with this nose wheel. So I believe the reason why I have a nose wheel shimmy is because of all the flat spotting on this tire. Now, if I touch down the nose wheel on landing with any kind of rudder input into this aircraft, the nose wheel will be canted either to the right or to the left. Now, if that wheel touches down, let's say to the left, I'm going to get a flat spot on the tire because now the tire is being dragged along the runway. So it's really important on these Piper Tomahawks to land with a neutral rudder input. So in a crosswind landing, you'll rely, right as the nose wheel is touching down, you'll rely on proper aileron input for your crosswind control. This aircraft came from a really windy airstrip. So when I bought it, I had an annual inspection done on it just after I purchased it. And we found with this flat spotting, we weren't sure if we were going to need to replace the tire. I was hoping that I could make it another year and do it next summer. But with the nose wheel shimmy I experienced a few times, it's something I'm going to be replacing. And just like that, the wheel's removed from the aircraft. I feel like I'm like in a cooking show or something. Ta-da! Now I've got the tire removed. I've got the aircraft just lowered onto this wood dunnage here to take the pressure off the engine hoist so that I don't end up having the aircraft drop on the ground if the hoist gives out. Now, you might be wondering how I can do this work myself. So in Canada, this task is considered elementary work, so I don't need the help of an aircraft maintenance engineer, or AME for short. In the States, it's worded as preventative maintenance. So in the States, if you're comfortable doing this work, you don't need the help of an IA or AMP certified mechanic. Now, given my experience and comfort level, I have no problem doing this job myself. If you are uncomfortable about it or not sure what to do, either get the help from a certified mechanic or simply swipe the visa wrench and have them do it for you. Now, the next part of this video will be from the warmth of my garage at home. The plan is to remove the wheel bearings, take the wheel halves out, clean everything up, and get it ready for the new tire and inner tube. Okay, so I've got the wheel at home. This is a Cleveland style wheel, which is very commonly used in aircraft. The main safety thing here is that this wheel is actually made up of two halves that are bolted together. You can see a bolt here with a nut on either side. If I don't have the pressure relieved in this tire, when I undo these fasteners, this wheel can separate under a lot of force and can cause injury or damage. So before I separate this wheel, I will be bleeding off this pressure. In the meantime, I'm going to undo these snap rings on either side and take out the wheel seal and the wheel bearing. Now in aviation, they call a bearing a cone and a bearing race a cup. I'm used to the automotive terms of bearing and race. So if you hear me use those interchangeably, they're both terms for really the same thing. Now the snap ring comes out nice and easy. You can start it with a small screwdriver, and then you can just walk it out with your fingers. Now the wheel seal, we'll break it down on the pieces. This is actually a 3-piece seal. I'll zoom in on that later. And here is the bearing. So this is the cone or bearing. And here is the cup or race inside. And that has to be driven out and a new one either driven in place, or I'll show you a trick with that later. Now the other side, same thing. Walk the snap ring out. Walk your seal out. And the bearing or cone. So just to go over what these wheel seals look like. So they're 3-piece. So on each side are these metal, kind of like a shim, and inside the middle is where the wheel seal is. So this is actually like a felt ring. It is saturated with grease, and so its sealing edge is actually on the inside of the surface where it rides on the axle tube. So these ones, I have new ones that I'll be installing on reassembly because these ones are actually kind of stretched out. They've been used for several years, and it's time for new ones. So these metal rings will hold this felt kind of in alignment vertically and allow it to do its job. Now the wheel bearings are kind of a conical shaped bearing, and they fit inside a conical style cup under a bit of a preload so that it seats all the rollers, but we'll get to preload later on when it's time to reassemble it. So next I will remove the cups or bearing race. What I'm going to do is support the inner part of the wheel using some wood while I tap out the cup on the other side using a brass punch. Now the reason for the brass punch is it's a material that's softer than the other metals I'm working with. The punch will take the damage before anything else gets damaged. And the reason why I support the inside of the wheel is that if I have the weight resting on the outside of the wheel while I hammer on the inside, it could potentially crack or damage this wheel. So with both of these cups now removed, I'm going to clean the inner hub of this wheel before I separate the halves, just so it doesn't contaminate the inner tube with any grease. Now I'm putting a new inner tube in, but I want to keep this one nice so that I can use it as an emergency spare. Super high tech, so I'm heavy enough that I can walk around without damaging the wheel and separate this bead. So as you can see, me walking around it, now I've separated this bead. I'll flip it over and do the same for the other side. I've separated the wheel from the tire. I can actually just use my fingers now to squeeze the tire away from the bead of the wheel. And same with the other side. So I'm ready to take out the fasteners now and split both halves of the wheel. Now the wheel halves remove. Now we've got the tire with the inner tube sitting inside. Now I'm going to use this spare when I go on long cross-country trips by myself. I'll have the useful load to be able to pack this in the cargo bay with me, just in case I run into any emergencies. Now I'll put the valve in, of course, and keep this set aside. I'm going to show you something quick. So here is the bore for the race, and here's the old race or cup. As you can see, it's an interference fit, meaning the hole of the bore is just slightly smaller at its seated depth than the race. And so the way to install it easier is to heat up the wheel and cool down the race, which brings me to the point of the significant others. It's the best time to beg for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. To beg for forgiveness. Now I'm going to show you one of my favorite recipes. Now whether you're by yourself or with your friends, flying is an excellent pastime, and no better way to enjoy flying than with perfectly working wheel bearings. Oh, these just smell great even before I put them in the oven. All right, here we go. We'll be back in a little bit. Now, in preparation for cooling down the bearing races, I've had the races hiding behind the frozen peas this whole time. Now, if my wife finds out and I don't make it to another episode of Plains with Perry, I've swallowed an Apple AirTag. Come find my body. So I'm ready for the next step. That'll involve taking the wheel out, setting it on this support, grabbing the cold bearing race or cup from the freezer and dropping it in. If it doesn't drop in all the way, I've got this bearing race driver, which is made for the exact size that I need. So I was lucky to have that. But if it needs any kind of install, probably just be a little bit of a tap on this driver. Anyways, I'm not going to talk much through this next step, just because I want to focus and get it done as quick as I can before both parts have time to equalize in temperature. There we go, seated all the way in without the use of a bearing driver. That's slick. Now we're just going to let it sit, and as it equalizes temperature, the race will become fixed inside the bore of the wheel. One check I'm going to do is just to lift it up and make sure that I can see no gap where the race is seated. As you can see, perfectly seated to the bottom of the bore. That's an awesome way to go. Now I'm going to do the same, so round 2 on the other half of the wheel. Here we go. Tappy tappy all the way to the bottom. Awesome. So here's the scoop. I didn't quite know how to mount the inner tube into the tire and put the wheel halves together without potentially pinching the inner tube, because I've never done it before. So I went and met up with my aircraft maintenance engineer, and he kind of walked me through the process. So what it involved was coating the inside of the tire with essentially what's similar to baby powder, as well as rubbing the inner tube in that. We partially inflated the inner tube to fit it in where it should be. Now, to help out with the balance of these wheels, the factory marks a red dot on the tire, and that's basically the lightest spot on the tire. So you want to match up the valve stem of the inner tube to that spot on the tire when you put it together, and that's the best likelihood of balancing out as is. So we went ahead and did that. We put the wheel halves together. We put it together using new lock nuts, new fasteners to put the wheel halves together. And then what we did was we slightly inflated it while bouncing the tire to get the inner tube to seat where it should seat. And the idea with that is that the inner tube will relax to its proper position without being folded or creased inside the tire. So once we did that, we inflated it up to the next level and the next level while bouncing it and working it in between. And everything's good, so it's ready to go on. One really cool thing that we do is we paint on these slip indicators. And so what we do is we mark the tire and the wheel, and during your pre-flight inspection, you take a look at that. Now, if there's any kind of shift, what that means is potentially your inner tube now has stress put on the valve stem, and you might end up with a blowout inside the tire. So it's a really cool addition to put on your tire for those pre-flight inspections. Here's the new felt seals, which I ordered. They are shockingly expensive, considering they're just pieces of felt. But the idea is you want to get them kind of pre-soaked with grease so that they will repel water. If you put them in dry, you run the risk of them absorbing water, and then you cause corrosion in your wheel and bearings. So now the nose wheel's installed, I've got the cowl put back together, and we're ready to fly on the next nice day. Well, today is finally the day to fly. It's minus 13 degrees Celsius. You can see the runway behind me. I went out and checked it out. Since we don't have a weather station at the runway, I gotta check it with boots on the ground. And as you can see, it's pretty much 95+% bare with no black ice. It's actual asphalt. So great traction and ready to fly. You can see the runway heading compared to the windsock. I'll zoom in on this windsock here and checking the app with windy. You can see the crosswind component of the wind vector is so small, it's practically negligible. So more than safe enough to fly.
Bow Island area traffic, this is Piper Tomahawk, Golf Tango Zulu Whiskey. I'll be backtracking runway 23 for takeoff, Bow Island. This thing climbs like a rocket ship for a Piper Tomahawk in this cold temperature. This is amazing. We're doing 900 feet a minute. That's awesome. So one of my previous episodes is all about a winterization kit and installing winterization plates on this Piper Tomahawk. I'll show you what the engine temperatures are sitting at. So my oil temp is sitting right in the zone there. And that's with those plates installed, keeping that extra heat up in the cowl to keep the engine at operating temperature, with it being around minus 10 degrees Celsius outside, so it's perfect. You can see the beauty flying over southern Alberta at this time of year, just like a winter wonderland. The nice thing too is if you do have an engine out, there's plenty of plowed fields everywhere at this time of year, lots of outs. Left radio, Tango Zulu Whiskey is turning final, runway 31.
Tango Zulu Whiskey, left radio, under wind 3208.
Well, like a lot of things aviation, the pursuit of racking up hours continues to be a bit of a pursuit. My nose wheel shimmy wasn't fully eliminated, but it was definitely improved. So rather than a high-speed shimmy that I experienced on takeoff and landing rolls as a result of that flat spotted tire, I've now got a much lower speed shimmy that's only when I apply brakes and the nose dips. So I believe what's happening is the nose oleo compresses, which changes the angle of the torque link, and then the free play that's in the torque link as a result of that worn out tire working the torque link, that shimmy now becomes apparent. So the next step is to get a rebuild kit, which I've now got on the way. I believe it's now clearing Canadian Customs, so I'm excited about that. I've got a bushing and hardware kit coming from McFarlane Aviation. So the next step will be to replace the bushings in the torque link sections with my aircraft maintenance engineer. We'll get that torque link overhauled. That'll eliminate all the free play in that torque link. That should be the end of the shimmy once and for all, which will then green light me to rack up the hours. So I've decided to roll the second part into a new video. So the torque link overhaul and test flying afterwards, and hopefully elimination of the shimmy will be in a second part coming soon. So please like and subscribe to this video. You'll be notified on when that one comes out. In the meantime, Happy New Year's. Hope you all had a great holiday and great family time, and we'll see you on the next one.